If we just give everybody licenses in the organization, we're like, have at it, you're not going to get results that are going to move the needle. You're going to get these little efficiency gains where everybody is like figured out, I can save 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here, but we're not seeing that impact revenue. I was looking at a customer's org a while back and they had a $100,000 sales opportunity. And this isn't just one sales opportunity. This is just the one random one I happened to look at. And they had a $100,000 sales opportunity that was closed lost. And there was no reason, there was no notes, there was no indication of like who made the decision, what their decision criteria was, none of the medic stuff. You just look at this and you're like, okay, I know that the rep had a series of meetings and then lost this deal. That's all I can see. If we feed that information to the AI and then we take the same data for the closed one, which also doesn't tell us anything, what is the AI going to tell us? Absolutely nothing. My advice to somebody trying to implement AI would be the same advice I would give to somebody trying to do anything in go-to-market, which is center in on the thing that's going to drive the most improvement. Welcome to Go-to-Market Science, the podcast for CROs and revenue leaders scaling mature B2B companies. There's an art and there's a science to go-to-market, and we're obsessed with the science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, from what we're learning working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. If this podcast delivers value, we'd love a 5-star rating and a follow. Now let's get into it.
Today, we're talking about what's going on with B2B SaaS right now. We recently reviewed 7 major State of Go-to-Market reports from 2025, and the picture is a little bit sobering. Most companies are missing their number, sales efficiency is declining, even as AI investment goes up, and a lot of people are wondering if SaaS as we know it is in trouble or even dying, as we've been hearing a lot on LinkedIn. So we're going to dig into what the data says, what Eddie, our CEO and founder, is seeing on the ground, and what you can actually do about it to get a better outcome in 2026. Hey, Eddie, how's it going?
It's going well. Great summary. I would add that I think it's not just LinkedIn. I think the entire stock market is talking about this. They're calling it the SaaS apocalypse. I'm not sure if anybody listening to this podcast, if this is new information for them, I doubt it. But I'm kind of excited to jump into this and maybe dispel a little bit of that as well. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into this. There's a lot to unpack here. 7 industry reports, 3,100 go-to-market leaders, $91 billion in pipeline. I think it was 11 million pipeline opportunities. It's a massive data set that was analyzed by 7 of the industry leaders. Actually, more than that, because some of these reports are compiled by multiple groups. And look, like we don't have the resources to do that kind of research, which is why we're just stealing from others. What I want to do in this podcast, I want to talk about what's behind it, what we can infer from it, what CROs and go-to-market leaders should do as a reaction to the data in these reports. And there's a lot of common themes from one report to the next, and I'm really excited to dive into it with you, unpack it, and talk about what CROs can actually do with these insights.
It was really interesting to lay these 7 reports out side by side and really see the patterns going on that, throughout the entire B2B SaaS industry. So Eddie, what are you hearing these days from the people you talk to every week?
Well, let's just start with like objective information, right? Stock market's way down. Like Salesforce is an example, which I think is kind of like the penultimate example of a SaaS company. I don't know if I want to say they invented SaaS, but they certainly pioneered it. Their stock is way, way down. They're actually net down for 5 years. Like if you had bought a share of stock in Salesforce 5 years ago, it would be worth less today than what you paid for it, while the S&P has rallied, and had great returns. A little bit of ups and downs, of course, over the last 5 years, but like really great returns overall, which is just absolutely abysmal, right? And you're seeing this across the entire industry. And I think this is a combination of factors. I think there are legitimate concerns for some of these companies. And this is also just Wall Street doing what Wall Street does. And, I used to work on Wall Street, so I have some level of appreciation as well as disdain for how they view things. It's herd mentality. And everybody thinks AI is the future. But what is AI? What is an AI native company? What is a SaaS company? I think we're really splitting hairs here trying to define the difference. I mean, Salesforce has tons and tons of AI features. They're talking about rebranding as Agentforce. They've made tons of acquisitions. Is Salesforce a SaaS? Is it AI? I think we're splitting hairs here. And I don't think that is really what's necessarily driving the valuation or driving customers to buy Salesforce or really tells us anything about what's happening right now. And so I'll stop there and we can unpack it further as you ask more questions.
So when companies come to you right now, what's the general mood? What's keeping revenue leaders up at night?
Well, I think like you hit the nail on the head when you summarize these reports in that, targets are being missed at every level. We're seeing this across the board, right? And so when we have CROs and revenue leaders reach out to us, there's oftentimes, and it depends on the organization and how open they are about things. There's definitely folks, especially we have some customers that are not in B2B SaaS that are crushing it. There's definitely folks that are doing really well. But I think across the board, a lot of go-to-market teams are struggling. A lot of salespeople are struggling. Very few are hitting quota. Quota attainment is down. And these, I think, are all things that most people listening to this podcast are probably well aware of. But then I think, we don't generally have conversations where we stay at this high level for very long. So when we get into the weeds, that may be the more interesting thing to share about what we're seeing. And a lot of it comes down to the fundamentals that we're always talking about. And the thing that I'm seeing, especially with some of like the podcasts you've been doing recently, Rachel, like you had Kyle Norton on the podcast, and he published something the other day on LinkedIn talking about this divide. We are seeing some companies that leverage AI effectively create these massive efficiencies that are driving massive improvements in their ability to generate revenue. And I think part of that is having really smart leaders and really smart RevOps and go-to-market engineering teams. But it's also this focus on getting the fundamentals right and planning things right and doing all the things that we knew that we needed to do in go-to-market all this time. But I think that's now setting a foundation that is being accelerated by AI or not. Because if you don't have that foundation, you layer the AI in there and you save a few minutes here and a few minutes there, but you're not seeing impact on revenue. Meanwhile, your competitor has that foundation in place and they're seeing dramatic improvements in their revenue engine. And you're seeing this separation, the haves and the have-nots. And I think that is probably the bigger theme that goes beyond just the product. Though at the same time, let's not ignore the issue here. You can only do so much with your product and your product market fit. I don't think there's any magic bullet in go-to-market to sell an inferior product at the level of scale that's expected of most B2B SaaS companies.
I think there's this really big AI pressure cooker events kind of happening right now. Like you said, there's the haves and the have-nots. There's this feeling that if you're not incorporating AI into what you're doing, you're going to get dusted by competitors because everybody is using AI now. So I think a lot of these companies are implementing AI tools prematurely, as you said, without having these fundamentals down, and then they start amplifying the wrong things, and they're wondering, why is their investment not going anywhere with AI? Why is this not working for them? So yeah, let's get into that a little bit more. We did have a part of these reports was from Scale Venture Partners. And we did a whole other podcast and a whole other newsletter specifically on this one report with Craig Rosenberg. And one of the insights from their research we thought was very interesting, that there's a divide between companies who implement AI differently. So there's this phase 1 AI implementation versus phase 2 AI implementation, with phase 1 being more productivity gains like drafting emails, summarizing calls, and phase 2 being things that actually move department level metrics like microsegmentation, campaign analysis, AI call scoring, and stuff like that. And their data found that companies with phase 2 AI implementation were 3 to 5 times more likely to see measurable revenue impact from their AI usage. But they found that most companies are still stuck in phase 1. So there weren't a ton of companies that are doing that phase 2 implementation. So Eddie, what do you think is keeping people stuck in the productivity side of AI?
I think it goes back to that foundation. So let's use some concrete examples to paint a picture here. So let's say that we want to do account research. We want to help salespeople do account research using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. It's super simple. You just buy everybody licenses and you say, hey, go pop in there, put the website in there and ask it to do account research. So let's take that a step further. Let's go and write a prompt that we can share with everybody. Okay, that takes however long it takes to write a prompt. Not a lot of time. We could even take it a step further and let's create, a gem or, any kind of shared prompt that we can share across the team, across whatever tool we're using. And then now it does it for the rep. All of these things are very, very fast and easy to spin up. And you don't necessarily need any foundation for this, right? But how good is it to do account research for a rep and save them all the time in the world to do this account research if they're targeting the wrong accounts to begin with, if they're targeting the wrong people in those accounts, if they don't know the right way to do account research and the right way to translate that into messaging? I mean, what does it do to go and analyze the annual report for a company if the sales rep has no idea how to translate that into their actual step-by-step sales process? So I think that's part of it, right? On the flip side, and I want to dive into Kyle Norton's post the other day that I think really resonated with me. He talked about this bottoms up versus top down approach of developing AI. And the bottoms up is kind of what I just described. It's like, let's buy everybody licenses and let reps just start banging away and trying to figure out what's going to help them. Versus the top down approach, which is, as an organization, let's look at this holistically and let's try to figure out how we can design a system that is going to be better and more efficient for our reps and our marketers and our customer service or customer success team. And Kyle made a very strong argument for the top-down approach. And the reason being is he's saying, look, like there's just a layer of infrastructure that a single person, especially a rep or a marketer or a customer success person, can't replicate. Like, Rachel, if I come to you and I say all the things that you're doing every day, I need you to like pop into Claude and write a prompt, you can do that. But you don't have the time or even the skill set to say, okay, we're going to build this massive database. We're going to connect it with whichever AI LLM we use. We're going to have a workflow that we're going to build out with N8N. We're going to, create an MCP. We're going to go and use Cloud Code. Like, we're going to do all of these things that require heavy lifting from, RevOps or go-to-market engineering standpoint. Now, let's start with the correlation causation. First of all, what team is able to do all of that? That's going to be the team that already has a strong RevOps team in place, go-to-market engineering team in place, has a strong leader in place. They're already ahead of the curve. So when I say correlation causation, we're comparing companies that already have a lot of like the fundamentals in place and beyond that are having this success versus a company that is unable to do that. Let me give another concrete example. So in that report from Scale Venture Partners, they talked about phase 2 or an example they shared for phase 2 was campaign analysis, right? How are you going to feed marketing campaigns into an AI to analyze it and then decide which campaigns you're going to double down on and which ones you're going to cut back on? That requires a really fundamental understanding of your marketing process. You have to have clear definitions in place. What does an MQL mean? How do we define that? How do we measure that? Where's the report that shows us the MQL? How about pipeline? Do we all agree on what a sales qualified opportunity is? Where's the report that shows which campaigns, drove the most revenue, closed one versus not? If we don't have that stuff in place, we're not going to get a very good result by just popping in and saying, hey, we ran these campaigns. Here's a bunch of MQLs we generated. Nobody can agree on the definition. So the number of MQLs that we generated is meaningless. We have no insight into how those MQLs converted into pipeline or closed won revenue. And we're just going to take that and dump that into Claude and give it a prompt and say, analyze our campaign performance. What are you going to get out of that, right? So the teams that have the fundamentals in place, meaning they have the definitions all agreed upon, they have the process well documented, and they have a data layer built to feed that AI engine, are going to be light years ahead of their competitors. And you're going to have a high correlation between teams that have that and teams that have a really strong CRO integrated in with RevOps and go-to-market engineering, all working together to go build these things. So how in the world are you going to compete if, like, Rachel, I just put this on you, all the stuff you're doing every day in marketing, putting this podcast together, and I'm just like, Rachel, go figure out AI, and you're all by yourself versus a team like Kyle Norton's where everybody's aligned and they have this like massive amount of resources to go build the infrastructure to help you. There's no way you can compete. Like, you're just outgunned.
So what's the solution there? I mean, obviously it's much harder to just say, or it's much harder to just do like phase 2 AI than it is to say it.
So, this is going to be a shameless plug for our services or for hiring either, firms or individual employees like us. you need to hire the right set of people to first build that foundation. So you go to our go-to-market efficiency pyramid. We've laid this out. We've laid out the fundamentals. We've laid out the adoption. We've even laid out the optimization. You need to figure out how to get a motion in place that's working. So let's take outbound as an example. If you can't tell me who your ICP is, what the territory is that your reps are covering, what the step-by-step process is to prospect into those accounts and contacts, where your reporting is to measure what's working, what's not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you actually have people executing those motions. If you don't have that in place, you can't even do the basics to just run a report and say like, well, what's working, what's not? Like we're doing outbound into this industry versus that industry, which is working better. These is like bare bones basic stuff, right? You get that in place, then you can layer the AI on top. And you can start to ask, well, okay, we have a really successful motion of targeting the right people and the right accounts, going to the website, reading through everything, doing our research, personalizing the email, personalizing the voicemail, personalizing the LinkedIn DM. How could we use AI to do account research to speed that up? Then you go into the go-to-market engineering layer and you start to think like, okay, how do we build this infrastructure that's scalable across our entire organization? And I had an aha moment listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about like, one of the biggest problems with AI is like out of the box, it's designed in a silo. Like you have your chat and I have my chat and they're not talking to each other. And if we just give everybody licenses in the organization, we're like, have at it, you're not going to get results that are going to move the needle. You're going to get these little efficiency gains where everybody is like figured out, I can save 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here, but we're not seeing that impact revenue. Versus like we have seen more and more stories recently, like Kyle Norton, like what Craig shared in the Scale Ventures report, where there's actual tangible revenue growth being attributed to the AI agents and AI that people are building and implementing. But it requires the right people at the right time with the right attention to like roll their sleeves up and build this foundation and then build on top of that foundation.
Do you think it's kind of just a natural progression then? Once you have the right team and infrastructure in place, you're just naturally going to find these areas where you can use AI for, stuff that impacts the actual business outcome?
Yeah. And I don't think it's any different from what we saw with technology in the past, whether it's Salesforce or Outreach Sales Loft or what we're doing in marketing or what we're doing in customer success. Like the teams that have had these fundamentals in place have always been able to optimize that. I mean, if you think about what AI is doing is it's pattern matching, right? So especially on the analytics side, which I think is a really exciting aspect of AI, if we feed it the right data, it can look at what we're doing and what's working and what's not. But if we don't have the right data to feed it, it's really difficult to do that. In addition to that, like it's taking inputs and trying to produce outputs. And if we can't even define what a good output is for a human to generate, it's going to be really hard to define what a good output is for the AI agent. And I think we're seeing this more and more. I mean, Jason Lemkin is talking about this incessantly. There's no like easy magic button, plug and set it and forget it, plug and play. Like when we build these AI agents, you have to coach them and give them feedback again and again and again, just like a human. And if you don't have the foundation in place to do that, you're not going to have success with it. And I'm just blown away at the number of people I've talked to where you're like, how are you using AI? They're like, we bought everybody ChatGPT licenses. And you're like, that's it? Like, I mean, I get it. Like we've done the same thing. We bought everybody ChatGPT licenses and Claude licenses and Gemini licenses and all that stuff. Like, but you can't just stop there. So yeah, that's my answer.
And it's reflected in these other reports as well. The report that Clarion Sales Loft put together found that 48% of enterprises doubt that their revenue data is AI ready. And EBSTA and Pavilion's report found that 44% of the contacts the contacts that sellers interact with aren't even recorded in the CRM.
Yeah. I mean, so like, what does that mean, right? What does it mean that we don't have the right data layer in place? First and foremost, it means that we don't have our definitions and process in place. So for example, if we say like, this is what an MQL means, this is what an SQO means, even this is what closed won means, which just sounds crazy to me, but we've seen issues with that too. Then how are you going to engineer the system to provide that data? Second, like what is the step-by-step process? So we take like the example of a sales qualified opportunity pipeline, right? Like what does that mean? What needs to be in place in order to enter pipeline into Salesforce? the unfortunate reality is like there's a lot of human effort that goes into that. And so if we don't have our process in place and our sales reps aren't following that, and one rep just every single time they meet somebody, they create an opportunity in Salesforce, and the next rep, they wait until they get a verbal before putting it in Salesforce because they don't want to put the work in. We've seen this. I mean, this is a literal example that I've seen so many times. Then when you try to feed that data into the AI, it can't pattern match because it's missing all the key data. You then go down like field by field and you ask like, what are the important fields? So one of the things that I think is really interesting about AI, and this is a combination of AI and non-AI solutions, is just augmenting that data, right? So if we want to know, and you got to think about like what data is relevant to our process, right? So every organization is selling a different offering into a different type of customer. Like that's what makes your product unique. Well, you can't just say, okay, like we need to see every single company's name, address, revenue, and headcount. That's not enough. So where do you want to augment that data? Some of that data needs to be manually entered by the humans that are speaking to that prospect or customer. But to the extent that we can augment that data with tools like Zoom Info and Clay, using AI to go scrape the website, there's all kinds of use cases. I skipped over emails, call transcripts, etc. We can augment a lot of that data, and then we can take our best customers, fill out that data, and then try to reverse engineer who we should be targeting. And it's a really exciting thing, but most organizations aren't there. I mean, I was looking at a customer's org a while back, and they had $100,000 sales opportunity. And this isn't just one sales opportunity. This is just the one random one I happened to look at. And they had $100,000 sales opportunity that was closed lost, and there was no reason, there was no notes, there was no indication of like who made the decision, what their decision criteria was, none of the medic stuff. You just look at this and you're like, okay, I know that the rep had a series of meetings and then lost this deal. That's all I can see. If we feed that information to the AI, and then we take the same data for the closed one, which also doesn't tell us anything, what is the AI going to tell us? Absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like, you have a much higher close rate with people named Bob. Cool, thanks.
Exactly. Or even worse than that is that, the incorrect data makes the AI find the wrong patterns and feed you back completely wrong insights that you then just take at face value, go to your board or whatever, and then you start making business decisions based on these incorrect insights and just start going in the absolute wrong direction.
Well, and this is a really good example, right? So like, I'm not sure to what extent people would actually do that, because we all know AI hallucinates. But if you think about it, like if we don't have the team in place to build out these fundamentals, to drive the team to adopt those fundamentals, to then like analyze the data and see what's working and what's not, then we probably don't have the organizational rigor to do the things that we need to do to make AI work, right? Because we're going to have to go and build an agent. We're going to have to continue to coach it and iterate upon it. We're going to have to verify that the outputs are good. We're going to have to work with it. And Jason Lemkin, they've got all these AI agents at SaaStr that he talks about. He emphasizes pretty strongly that you basically have to coach these AI agents just like a human. If you don't have the team in place to do the basics, how are you going to do that? You're just not. Even people that are well aware that like, I know we should do this. I know that the initial output is not good or sufficient. We just don't have the time, resources, and expertise to go iterate on this. And I don't think there's going to be any secret sauce here. You just have to keep iterating and iterating and iterating. And yes, like there's some stuff that's very complicated from a go-to-market engineering perspective that I won't get into on this podcast. But if you don't have the time and resources to iterate on it, you're not going to get to the final destination that these other organizations are getting to.
Absolutely. And to give, our listeners example of what this can look like when done successfully, we talked to Kyle Norton recently and had him on the podcast, or wrote a newsletter on him from the podcast. They used AI call scoring to change their close one rates from 35% to 38% to 53% closed one. And, 38% isn't a bad number. It wasn't like anything was broken there and they were, struggling and underwater, but they had the infrastructure in place, they had the tools in place, they had the right data in place, and then they were able to continue to investigate and find out where they could improve even further.
Well, and this is what I'm talking about with the correlation causation thing, right? When I read, because you did the podcast and you wrote the article, which is really nice, by the way. When I'm reading it as like a passive listener, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing like, okay, they had a culture in go-to-market of analyzing their data on a continuous basis and consistently looking for ways to tweak the go-to-market engine to make it better. That is, you're already in the 1% if you're there, right? So it's not like they woke up one day and said, we want to deploy this AI agent and we have junk data. We can't get anybody to log into Salesforce. All of our systems are disconnected. Marketing has their MQL report over here and sales has their closed one report over here and CS is using yet another system. They had all of these fundamentals in place. They had the people in place. They had the practice of analyzing their data in place, which, by the way, in our go-to-market efficiency pyramid, the third layer, optimization, is primarily just like analyzing your data to see what's working and what's not. Then they layered the AI agent on top. And the AI agent told them things that they were surprised by. Like Kyle said, I would have thought that the number one behavior correlated with winning deals would have been doing good discovery. And they found that wasn't the thing that made the big difference. It was 12 other things like asking for the sale, clarifying next steps, like really simple stuff. And then of course, hindsight is 2020. You look at it and you're like, oh, okay. Like they have a transactional sale where they sell to mom and pop business owners, restaurant owners to be specific. It's all about momentum. These sales happen really quickly. It's probably an emotional buy for these individuals. It's not like they're going through a procurement, right? That makes perfect sense. I wonder what would happen if you ran the same AI call scoring on an enterprise selling motion, right? I would think that discovery would show up as much more, key to closing and winning deals. But that insight was invaluable for them. And to your point, 38% is a phenomenal close rate. Most B2B SaaS companies right now are looking at close rates between 10 and 20%. And it's not because they can't close deals. It's because their definitions and process are broken. They're closing 10% of deals that many of which that they were never going to close. They were never qualified. It's just people dumping stuff into the CRM. Then on top of that, they're missing steps in the sales process. That's not the case when you have a 38% close rate. When you have a 38% close rate, you've got stuff dialed in. And to then take that to 53 is incredible. That's an improvement of, what's the math on that? I can't do 53 over 38 in my head, but that's something like a 30% improvement, 30% more closed won revenue. That's massive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's not like 53 minus 38 is 15 or whatever. It's, oh no, that's more than 30%. It's like 40% improvement. That means instead of closing $100 million in revenue on your pipeline, you're closing $140 million in revenue. That's insane.
Quick pause. If you're getting value from this episode, I want to ask you a small favor. Take 30 seconds right now, open up the app you're listening to this on, and give us a 5-star rating. It sounds small, but it's the single biggest thing you can do to help us get conversations like this in front of more revenue leaders. While you're there, hit follow so you never miss an episode. Okay, let's get back into it.
All right, let's move on to ICP discipline. So the Fullcast report found that high ICP fit accounts are 8 times more sales efficient, but they only make up for 23% of the average pipeline, and 56% of companies are still defining ICP based on gut feeling, with about 63% of CROs having little or no confidence in their ICP definition, which is not good. Absolutely terrible.
Perfect
so Eddie, why
segue.
Do you think...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, why do you think, first of all, why do you think high ICP fit accounts are 8 times more sales efficient?
It's just obvious. Like that's the definition of ICP, right? Like that's, yeah. I can't think of a good analogy here. That's how you define ICP. Like if you ask me like, hey, how do I define my ICP? I would say, go in and figure out which accounts are 8 times more likely to close. That's your ICP, right? It's really that simple. Doing it is the hard part. So this goes back into what we were just talking about. If you don't have the foundation in place, it's going to be really hard to get your ICP defined, and then to get your team to actually adhere to that ICP when they're working pipeline. So, for example, let's say we want to look at all of our best customers. We want to look at the deals that we've closed won, the largest deals, the fastest sales cycles, the easiest deals to win. And by extension, we want to look at lifetime value. We want to look at retention rates. We want to look at which customers were easiest to serve. That requires a lot of data, especially in the extreme, right? Like, let's take this, the absolute extreme when we say we want to look at our best, most profitable customers. How do we define that? Well, we need to know how much revenue is tied to each customer, how many years they've renewed for. Okay, that's table stakes. That's pretty basic. We want to know like how many customer service cases they submitted. We need to understand, their sentiment, if they're happy with us, their satisfaction levels. Okay, these are all great things. Somewhat easy to get. We have to have like proper systems in place for this. We need to understand like how difficult they are to serve. How is our team bending over backwards and we're losing money to keep this customer, or are they super easy to serve, right? That requires a fair amount of data. But then we have to cross-reference that with all of our sales data. Did it take us like 17 meetings and we had to go through procurement and, we had to, have everything go through legal and redline contracts and all of these like hoops that we had to jump through to win this customer? Where do we get that data from, right? Then we have to extend that and say, okay, great. Now we know who our best customers are. How do we describe them? We need their firmographic data, their technographic data. We need nuances about those customers that dictate how we sell uniquely, right? And so I've used a couple examples in the past of this. When I was at Salesforce and I was trying to sell the competitor to HubSpot, used to be called Pardot. Don't even know what it's called these days, if that tells you anything about my feeling on the product. We would go to companies' websites and see if they had HubSpot, if they had Marketo, if they had a bunch of trackers, if the website was nice and it looked like they spent a lot of money and updated it recently, or if it looks like they didn't spend a lot of money and updated it 10 years ago. These are really important factors, right? If you don't have that data set, it becomes hard to identify who your ICP is, even when you're looking at them. If all you have is the name of the company and their revenue, then you're like, great, our best customers are companies in this industry between $50 and $100 million. Like, okay, great. Can we be more specific? Because the more specific we can get, the more we can define it on the front end and say, okay, this is the target account list that we're building for our sales team. These are the accounts that we should be marketing to. This is the type of content we should try to develop. And we've seen this firsthand for us. Our most successful customers by all measures are companies above 50 million in revenue, up to about 500 million in revenue. We've got some companies that are larger than that we've had a lot of success with, but we don't see them as often. And then we have CROs. Not only do we have CROs in place, but we have CROs that really care about this stuff. CROs that want to listen to a podcast like this, that want to figure out how to like engineer their go-to-market to be better. The CROs that just want to, scream, make more sales calls, and they want to close every deal, and they just want to be like Mr. Sales Hero. Those folks aren't listening to this podcast. And when we try to pitch what we do and how we help them, it doesn't resonate with them. And that's a really unique data point that's kind of hard to capture. But I think it's really important that companies think about things like this, because if all we're doing is operating on, industry revenue headcount, then we don't have the ability to like get laser focused on those accounts that have that, 8x conversion and close rates that all the other accounts have. So we got to get super specific, and that requires a really deep data layer. And that data comes from our marketing engine. It comes from the conversation salespeople are having. It comes from third-party tools. I skipped over intent. There's all kinds of signals out there to help us define our ICP, and most organizations don't have that data.
And it's funny, we call like that base layer fundamentals, the core things that every company just should have in place. And you would think that, maybe this is so common, like, why do we even need to talk about this? Like, obviously everyone would have this in place, but 63% of CROs have little or no confidence in their ICP definition. And that's one of the fundamentals. And to get that confidence, you need all those other fundamentals in place. So it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's hard, right? So think about it, like the average CRO is in seat for 18 months and then they lose their job at 18 months. So they come in, they hit the ground running, and they're just racing to try to hit this target. And then oftentimes they're out of a job in a year and a half. And we see this when we're trying to propose things. I mean, we don't even try to propose this stuff. I don't want to say anymore. I'm not sure if we ever did. But no person that we've ever talked to says like, you know what, I want to pay you guys to come in and spend 6 months just getting the lay of the land. Why don't you go and define our ICP, define our sales process, and at the end of 6 months, I want a bunch of Google Docs and a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if McKinsey gets away with that kind of stuff, but nobody's hiring us to do that stuff. No CRO has the patience to do that. And that's not even a knock on the CRO. Like if you're in seat for 18 months, you don't have time to do that. So we're trying to strike a balance. I mean, I'm not saying that CROs are not open to that, but we have to find a way to go define ICP while also going and fixing something yesterday so that reps can make more sales calls. Because as much as I always joke about make more sales calls, if we're not making sales calls, we're not making sales. So like you have to have both and you have to have a fine balance, right? And I think the best way to find that balance is to move quick and try to do, you know, the MVP. If we define our ICP a little bit better than we did yesterday, then we're in a better position. But I have yet to talk to a CRO that says, yeah, we can spend 6 months just sitting around defining our ICP. Nobody's in a position to do that. Maybe if you're like a $10 billion company, you can hire McKinsey to do that for you. But nobody I'm talking to, has that capability.
And a lot of CROs, they're after, the new logos, new pipeline generation. But how do we get them to balance, how they think about pipeline volume versus pipeline quality?
I mean, that's a hard one, right? So this, again, it goes back into the fundamentals. If we have reps that are focused on chasing deals they can't close, then all these bad things happen that I'll probably not go into great depth on, but, you just lose a lot of valuable selling time. On top of that, you're not giving the right attention to the deals that you can win. So you're going to lose some of those because you're skipping steps. You don't have time for reps to be prospecting. Just lots and lots of bad things happen. The trouble is it takes time and effort to go re-engineer the sales process and then train the team to go do that. And then think about how AI can help you do that, like Kyle Norton did. This just requires a lot of time. And so this is that delicate balance. Like in entrepreneurship, people talk about working in the business versus working on the business. It's the same idea for CROs. Like, how much time are you spending, telling reps to make more sales calls and helping them close deals and forecast versus working on improving the go-to-market engine? And if you're not spending any time on working on the go-to-market engine, it's just never going to improve, like by definition. And then what I oftentimes see is the CRO that's doing that, they eventually leave the organization, either voluntarily or involuntarily, and a new CRO steps in and they say, hold on a second. I worked at Salesforce or HubSpot or Clary or whatever. And this is not how you run go-to-market. Like, we need to fix this yesterday. And sometimes we are fortunate enough to be the recipients of that phone call. I need some help doing this.
Yeah. Well, that's why so many of our best clients are CROs that just came into a new role, because they are CROs that know that this stuff is important and they always work on this stuff, and they come into a new role and they see it's not there. They're like, I need execution help on getting this stuff figured out. This is a perfect segue into the next section on missed data on missed quotas and revenue loss. So how it all comes together in the end, in those final revenue reports. So across these reports that we analyzed, the majority of companies are missing their number. The Clary Sales Loft report found 87% of enterprises missed by more than 5%, and that's their revenue targets. The Ebsta Pavilion report found 70% of sellers missed their quota, and the Fullcast report found that even after quotas were reduced, 77% still missed. So, Eddie, what do you think is going wrong here?
I think there's a combination of factors. First, I think a lot of these targets are just unrealistic. Companies are setting targets based on hopes and prayers and not based on bottom-up fundamental analysis of like, okay, we need to make this many calls. This is our conversion rate historically. This is our close rate and our average sales cycle and our ASP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have this many reps and those reps need to onboard. All the things we outlined in the annual planning framework. There's definitely a gap there, especially when the CEO and the board are just saying like, okay, that's all great, but we still need to hit this number. Okay, well, you can try, but if it's an unrealistic number, no amount of planning is going to make up for that. In addition to that, I think it's just really hard. I mean, if you look at, David Spitz published a number of reports recently talking about public SaaS companies and how they have gone from spending 40% of revenue on sales and marketing down to 33% of revenue. So they're doing all this cost cutting coming off of the growth at all costs, zero interest rate era. Okay, cool. We've cut costs. And yet at the same time, they're generating less revenue per dollar of that remaining budget. So we're spending less money on go-to-market and we're generating less revenue for each dollar that we're still spending. And, you know, part of that is going to be the market and product. Like I said, go-to-market is not a magic bullet to sell anything to anybody. In fact, I think it's the opposite. If you have really, really good go-to-market, you're well aware that you can only sell the right product to the right person in the right organization at the right time. And right now, there's a lot going on. And everybody wants to implement AI across their entire organization. And if you are a company that is deemed as having a tool that's not AI native or whatever, then there's just a lot less demand for that solution. And it's tough right now. And I think there's a lot of hype. I think there's a lot of FOMO. I think people are buying a lot of AI solutions that are going to do absolutely nothing for them because there's just tons of pressure to just scramble and buy stuff. I mean, I feel this pressure. I get on the phone with private equity and venture capital firms every day, and they're like, what are you guys doing in AI? What are you guys doing in AI? What are you guys doing in AI? It's impossible to ignore that pressure. Every CRO is hearing that. And, you know, I've been in conferences where people are saying, okay, like if you're a CRO or a revenue leader, raise your hand if you're using AI. Every single hand in the room goes up. And then keep your hand up if you're seeing revenue impact from those AI solutions, and everybody's hand goes down. And so, you know, that's what I'm seeing right now.
And that ties back to, you know, what we were saying in the beginning about phase 1 and phase 2 AI. Like everyone's using it, but most people are using it for productivity style initiatives. And you don't see like a direct ROI correlation between that. And maybe there is, like, absolutely, you know, saving time saves money, but it's hard to see the ROI from that.
But keep in mind, like, even I'm getting confused on what we're talking about here, because on the one hand, we're talking about go-to-market, and on the other hand, we're talking about all business, right? Because these go-to-market teams are selling solutions into other areas in other businesses, right? And so we're seeing the same thing in B2B go-to-market that we're seeing across, you know, business in general. I mean, there's all these publications coming out talking about how, you know, everybody's buying AI in every industry, in every department, and not seeing any real results. It's the same thing. And so if you are running a B2B SaaS company and you're a CRO or another revenue leader in go-to-market, and you're trying to drive revenue for your B2B SaaS solution, you're selling into the accounting department in healthcare, you're competing with the pressure that accounting department in a hospital is facing from their executives and their board and their investors saying, you guys need to go find ways to implement AI. And what we're also seeing that I think is really interesting is you have a lot of these quote unquote AI native solutions that are just crushing the world, and they're going from like 0 to 500 million in revenue in a year or two, which is just insane. And I'm literally on Zoom calls talking with their venture capital firms, and they're saying, these guys, their go-to-market is super messed up. They just have tons of demand for their product. Jason Lemkin also talked about this. Some of these products are so hot right now that the team can't even respond to leads. So they've just got this flood of leads coming in, and they're just ignoring people. And part of it is because it's like, look, like we don't have the capability to go hire 100 or 1,000 people. So we're going to use automation and AI in our own go-to-market to try to respond to these leads. And this is not a best practice. This is not something that like a B2B SaaS company without that level of demand can replicate. It's like, hey, this is not great, but it's the best that we can do. And we just have this flood of demand. And then you look at these organizations, you're like, oh my God, they grew to $300 million in revenue in 1 year. How, like, we should replicate what they're doing. And it's like, sure, from a product development standpoint, yeah. From a go-to-market standpoint, no.
Yeah, that is such an important distinction to make. So another data point here, Clary Labs found that 26% of a company's revenue is lost to revenue leak, and that adds up to $2 trillion in lost economic value annually. So it's a bit of a change of gears here. But Eddie, do you think companies are even aware of how much that they're leaking?
No, because like you'd have to define it to see it, right? So when you think about revenue leakage, like let's think about common examples of that. Leads not getting followed up with. Okay, why would you not follow up with leads? Well, the reason is because you don't have a process in place to track and measure it, or you're just sending a bunch of junk leads to sales, right? there's a bunch of reasons why this is happening. And if you are in that boat, you're also not measuring it accurately. So you wouldn't even know how much you're losing. If you did know, you'd probably fix it. It's kind of like, I don't know why I'm thinking about like a dieting analogy. It's like if anybody wants to lose weight, the easiest, I shouldn't say easiest, but the most successful strategy is just to simply measure everything you're eating, right? If you just know how many calories you're supposed to eat and you start measuring it every day, you'll end up eating the right amount of calories. But what happens is most people, myself included, have no idea what they're eating. Even me, I measure my food like every single day, or sometimes my wife is kind enough to do it for me. And so I can't necessarily eyeball it. It's the exact same scenario I'm talking about here, right? If you measure all of your food, you're going to eat less. If you measure all of your leads that aren't getting followed up with, you're going to follow up with those leads. The same thing happens with pipeline, with customer success, with how we're onboarding customers, with how we are doing QBRs and trying to expand accounts and trying to save accounts before they're churning. If we don't have the fundamentals in place, we also don't have the ability to measure it accurately.
So how can we, and I know we've touched on this a bit before, but just in terms of specifically this, how can we get more visibility into potential revenue leaks?
I think you just got to get your fundamentals in place, the definitions, the process, you build out reports, and then you create a management cadence where you review those reports on a regular basis. Then, by extension, since we're here spending so much time talking about AI, then you figure out how to use AI to do that, to streamline that so that you can do more in less time. But like, I'm always using this example because I lived and breathed it at Salesforce for 3 years. It's just so simple. There were maybe 3 or 4 things that they expected us to have just absolutely dialed in on our qualified sales pipeline. And if it wasn't dialed in at any point in time, on any given day, you would get called out for it. And this might sound micromanagey, but in fact, it wasn't. It was just like really basic stuff. And when you get called out on something like that, especially like from, your boss's 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 boss once or twice, you don't make that same mistake again, especially when it's consistent feedback. It's like have the dollar amount, the close date, the stage, and the next steps updated. I mean, that's really basic stuff, right? And so if you're just constantly being held accountable to that, you're not going to make that same mistake. But if you don't have that kind of practice in place, no amount of like Salesforce architecture is going to fix that problem. And yes, I'm all for let's go and scrape through the emails and the call transcripts and let's try to update things. But at the end of the day, the sales rep is the only one that can say this deal should or should not be in pipeline. This deal should or should not be in this stage. I don't think AI is yet at a point that we can trust it to just move deals through the pipeline. It can augment that data. It can say, I think that the decision maker is this person. I think their decision criteria is this based on the call transcript. All of that's super helpful. Even without AI, like we've been automating our own sales process and sales processes for customers to limit the amount of like manual data entry that goes into things like the pipeline in Salesforce. But you still have to have a rep like put that effort in to say like, these are the deals that should be in pipeline. If you don't have that, then your data analysis is going to be flawed and you're not going to have the foundation in place to use AI effectively.
So when we're looking at all these companies, missing their end of year revenue targets, how much of that do you think, could be lessened or could be attributed to this revenue leakage?
Great question. I don't know what percentage or what number, but I would just say a lot, right? I think it's going to depend on the organization. Like I said, like the organizations that have things really dialed in, specifically, they not only have all the process and metrics and reports in place, the adoption, et cetera, but they also had a really well thought out annual plan. They did a bottoms up approach. They figured out like the headcount, capacity, onboarding, the activities, the conversion rates of those activities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those organizations are by definition going to have a lot less revenue leakage, and they're also going to have much more realistic targets. When we look at the flip side of this, organizations that have unrealistic targets are also most likely going to have more revenue leakage.
All right, now let's look a little bit at expansion, because this is an area where a lot of revenue can and does potentially come in, but people don't invest in it as much as they should be. So EBSTA and Pavilion's report found that 52% of new revenue came from existing accounts from their data set. Expansion deals closed in almost half the time, and win rates were more than double new logos. It also took significantly less stakeholders involved to close the deals. But Iconic's data found that only 25% of companies are using AI for these post-sale use cases, like churn prediction or helping with expansion. So, why aren't people investing in post-sale more, specifically with AI?
Great question. And I would say, I think Scale Ventures report that we did the podcast on also aligns with that. They said that the majority or more organizations are using AI more in marketing, then less in sales, and then less than that in CS. And everything that you say aligns with what I'm seeing. They announced some of those stats at the CRO conference that Pavilion did here in Denver. I've also just seen this my entire career. Like, it's pretty obvious to anybody who's ever tried to sell into new business and existing accounts that it's just way easier to sell existing accounts. And you get bigger deals and they convert faster. There's just trust established. It's just obvious. But I think one of the biggest problems with customer success is it's sometimes seen as a cost center. They don't get the same love and attention. Many CROs don't oversee customer success. If there's no sales leader overseeing customer success, then it's even more likely to be seen as a cost center and neglected. It's oftentimes understaffed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's one problem. Another problem is it's just way more complicated. Like, we've written content on every area of go-to-market, and every time we come to customer success and you think, like, here are all the things you need to do to define the process, there's way more steps involved, right? Like outbound. Okay, you figure out a prospect, you reach out to them 10 or 15 times, then you set up a meeting, and then it converts to pipeline, and then you either win the deal or you lose it, and there's some steps in between. Customer success is way more complicated than that. You have to have a proper handoff from sales to onboarding. You then have to go through an onboarding or implementation process. You have to get them to a healthy point, hopefully. If they're not healthy, then the customer success manager needs to step in and hold their hand until they are healthy. If they get healthy and then become unhealthy, you have to have a process for that. You have to carry them along all the way through the renewal. You have to reach out, about the renewal way in advance. You have to make sure that they're healthy, throughout the year. If you haven't done that by the time the renewal's coming up, it's too late to do anything about it. And then all of that, we haven't even talked about expansion, right? And you can't expand an unhealthy account. I mean, theoretically you can, but it's really hard to do. So when I worked at Salesforce covering existing accounts, that's the first thing I always did. We had all these fundamentals in place, all this data. Didn't have AI because I was there like 100 years ago. But at this point, I'm getting old. But I did have the ability to just triage my accounts and say, okay, these are the unhealthy accounts and these are the healthy accounts. For the unhealthy accounts, all I was trying to do was just go and kick the door in and say, hey, Mr. and Ms. CEO, CRO, CMO, you guys are spending a lot of money with us and it seems like you're not leveraging the tool properly. Can I get you some help? And then hand them off to the appropriate party to help them out. That's all that I could do as a quota carrying rep. Then I just focus on the green accounts. How do I expand this account? And you have to have all those things in place before you can really do that effectively. If you have a completely broken customer success process, then basically you hire an account manager and you say, hey, go and call into these accounts. And then trying to figure out which accounts do I call? Is this healthy? Is this unhealthy? What do I do? How do I get this handoff? How do I bring in the CSM? How do I get help? Am I quota carrying? Am I there to help? What am I doing? It's a lot of complexity and ambiguity. And if the team is also understaffed, then it just makes things incredibly difficult.
What are some AI use cases that you know of or that you've seen that can help with some of this stuff?
So I think first of all is just, trying to understand which accounts are healthy and unhealthy, right? I mean, you can definitely do that without AI, but there's some really interesting use cases to use AI to analyze all the different signals that you have. And you think about it, what I think is really interesting is you have your product usage data, which already, by the way, is hard enough to take that data, put it into Salesforce or whatever other tool you're going to use it, analyze it, sum it up into a score, et cetera. But then you also have all these other data sets. You have the interaction that company is having with your marketing. If you're doing any, customer marketing, you have third-party intent signals. You have all of this data. You might have a stakeholder leave the organization, and that could be a serious risk depending on what your product or service is. So if you take all that data and feed it into AI, there's some pretty incredible opportunities to get a better visibility into which accounts are healthy and not healthy. You can have an account that's healthy today and unhealthy tomorrow, right? Doing research, like prepping for QBRs or any other customer interactions, you have a way larger data set, right? So you have all the things that I mentioned, plus you have all the emails that have ever been sent. You have all the call transcripts, the notes, et cetera, the product usage that I mentioned. You have a very large data set to inform how you go into that meeting and how you prep for that meeting. So I think that that's a really, really great use case for AI. Obviously, any type of like customer service, there's great use cases for it. You have chat bots and things like that we've had for a long time. Those are the things that come top of mind for me, but I think there's just tons of use cases. There's obviously like writing the emails or writing the draft for the email. Like think about an expansion opportunity, all the data that I mentioned. How do you take that data and then convert that into a sales message? Dear Mr. or Ms. CRO or CMO or CFO, here's everything that we've learned about your company over the last 5 years of working with you, summarized in a couple quick points. Here's why I think that you and I should meet. That's an incredible use case for AI.
But to do that, you have to remember you need that data to be able to use it. So you got to have the systems in place where, the systems and processes where your CSMs and your people working these accounts are able to check these accounts and put that data in somewhere.
And you have to have the process in place. Like, is our process that we do a QBR with every single customer every quarter? Okay, well, then we can ask, how do we use AI to improve that? But if we don't even have that defined, it's going to be a lot harder to figure out how to leverage AI correctly.
So just be conscious of time. Let's quickly go over our last insight. So this is all about handoffs and go-to-market alignment. So Crossbeam and Pavilion's report found that aligned go-to-market teams are 67% more likely to hit their targets and report 38% shorter sales cycles. But the Ebsta and Pavilion report found that 54% of teams still lack functional handoffs between marketing and sales. So Eddie, why do you think this is? Why are teams so misaligned even though the benefits are so obvious?
Well, that misalignment goes back into the fundamentals and the amount of effort it takes to put those fundamentals into place, right? So one of those fundamentals is ICP definition. We talked about how much effort it takes to really dial your ICP in. The next is like, think about handoffs from marketing to sales. Like we're going to send an MQL to a sales rep. We have to define what is an MQL? How are MQLs routed? What is the expectation for response times? Do we need to respond within an hour, within 10 minutes? What's the process to do that? How many times do we follow up? These are all necessary in order to have a proper handoff. What information needs to be there with the MQL in order for the rep to follow up, right? How is that handed off from the SDR to the AE? What is the expectation? How are things handed off from sales to customer success? Like literally, I mean, this is something that like we've done in our own organization. When we sign a contract, how are things handed off from the person closing the deal? Oftentimes that's me to Jerry and the delivery team that's going to go deliver on that. I mean, we've sat down and mapped out step by step. We've created automated emails. We have, notes in a shared place. We schedule an internal, debrief, and then the external kickoff call where I or the sales rep would join to just make sure that we have a smooth transition. And all of that is literally sitting in a Google Doc somewhere that says this is our step-by-step process to do handoff from sales to CS, or in our case, delivery or consulting. All those fundamentals have to be in place in order to ensure that you have proper team alignment and handoffs. In addition to that, the reporting engine. So how are you going to have alignment if marketing is judged on MQLs and they have their report sitting in HubSpot, and sales is judged solely on Closed One and they have their report sitting in Salesforce, and those reports don't even show the same number of MQLs? You're going to have pretty serious misalignment if you have that. And then we could go all the way to like, okay, who runs marketing and sales and CS, and how are they incentivized, and what are the goals? And I just saw this post the other day, and I can't believe we're still talking about this. And they're saying, yeah, marketing is misaligned because marketing is being judged by how many MQLs they generate. It's like, okay, yeah, you guaranteed to have misalignment if that's how you are judging and paying and even giving job security to the person running marketing.
Absolutely. It's so easy to just get MQLs. Like if you told me, hey, Rachel, I need you to get, 1,000 MQLs or something, any way possible. There are ways that I could go out there and try to do that, but probably none of them would be anyone that we would actually sell to.
Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you to do that.
Yeah. All right. So we covered a lot of insights, a lot of data so far in this podcast. Eddie, what's a common mistake that you see companies making when they're trying to respond to all of this pressure that they're experiencing in B2B SaaS right now?
Well, we've talked about this a lot. I think it's just trying to do everything at once or trying to do too many things at once. My advice to somebody trying to implement AI would be the same advice I would give to somebody trying to do anything in go-to-market, which is center in on the thing that's going to drive the most improvement. Start with, is it new business or is it net revenue retention? Is it generating more pipeline or closing more of the pipeline we're generating? Is it retention or expansion? Is it outbound or is it inbound or is it all bound or is it partners? Is it the handoff from sales, the onboarding process? Is it the actual renewal process? Is it how we generate pipeline for expansion opportunities? Is it how we manage our pipeline opportunities and expansion and close those deals? What is it? Which of those things, just pick one thing that if improved would have the most outsized impact on your organization. And you might not have the perfect answer for this. You might have to take a guess, but just answering that question will put you light years ahead of everyone else. And then you could say, okay, what fundamentals do I have to have in place? What do I need to do to drive the team to adopt those fundamentals and actually execute? How can we optimize that by analyzing data and seeing what's working and what's not? And then how do we layer AI on top of that? And if you pick a narrow enough thing, you can actually do that very, very fast. You can go to our go-to-market efficiency pyramid and you can literally see like item by item all the things that need to be done. And oftentimes in a narrow enough use case, you can do all of that in 90 days. Or maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. And then now you build your MVP for your AI agent and it's off and running because you've defined what good looks like. And then you can start to iterate on that. And then my advice would be don't move on to the next thing until you get that right. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't have to like dial this in and say, okay, like our AI agent for outbound or inbound, let's use inbound because it's maybe a better use case. We've got an AI agent that's responding to inbound leads, and now we have a 90% conversion and a 75% close rate, and our average deal is now $500 million. We have to have all that in place before we go and try the next thing. No, but it just needs to be like not an absolute dumpster fire. Like, okay, like we're responding to all of these leads and we've got a decent conversion rate and like this seems to be working. Okay, we can keep tweaking this and iterating on it, but we can also move on to the next thing once we have that in place. But I see so many organizations where they're trying to do 15 different things and you're like, you can't even get your reps to follow up with the inbound leads that you have. Like you have literally a person that goes to your website and says, I'd like a demo, and they don't hear back for, 15 days. Okay. I mean, I had Dwayne Default on the show and he shared this exact example. Like one of their major inbound channels was people registering for trials. And if I remember correctly, I think he said it took them 10 days to respond to an inbound lead. Somebody is literally going and saying, I would like a trial of your product. And they don't hear back for 10 days.
That's bad.
By which point,
that's pretty bad.
By which point they've already bought from the competition. So he went in and fixed that. And you can imagine the night and day results that you would see from doing something like that. And then he talked about in our podcast about how after like kind of getting those fundamentals in place, now they're able to start layering on AI agents. So that would be my advice.
And by the time this podcast is out, we are going to have the Go-to-Market Ops Diagnostic Framework released, and we'll have the link to that in the show notes. I won't get too deep into the weeds on what the diagnostic will tell you, but it'll be a very helpful tool in doing all this yourself, and includes a worksheet where you can plug in your answers and see a visual heat map of where you should be prioritizing your efforts and your time.
Yeah, it's just translating our go-to-market efficiency pyramid and a couple other things to just kind of narrow in and say like, here's step-by-step how you diagnose your go-to-market engine. So it's not necessarily any like radical change from the content that we've been putting out, but we've packaged it in a way to make it easier for people to actually go run a diagnostic on their go-to-market in the way that we do for our customers.
All right, Eddie, to send us off on the last question here, what gives you optimism about where B2B SaaS is headed?
Ooh, wow, what a good question. I posted this like a week or two ago. I started this company because I was inspired by what I saw at Salesforce and with some of our best customers. I've been in sales my whole career. I paid my way through college in sales. I even did some sales before I started college. And every experience I've had, with the exception of Salesforce, has involved me walking in the door and just stepping into this just absolute mess where I'm spending all this time and effort trying to clean things up instead of actually selling. So I started this company and I said, like, I want to go and implement all these fancy tools and all these processes and do all these wonderful things for companies. And I became disenfranchised really quickly, specifically with like SalesLoft and Outreach, where I just saw like, okay, we've implemented this tool just so we can use it as a spam cannon and have a race to the bottom to get like virtually zero response rates because we don't have this like fundamental strategy and process in place. So we pivoted and we said, okay, we're not just going to build out tools. We're going to make sure that that strategy and process is in place. And we've been pitching this to the world and it's been great. We've got some amazing customers and we're working directly with CROs and CEOs and private equity and venture capital firms backing them. And it's really wonderful, but it's really hard because like, I feel like we are preaching this to the world and so many people, it just doesn't resonate with them. They're just not ready to embrace this concept of building a data-driven, process-driven, strategy-driven go-to-market organization. There's still a lot of, let's hire more salespeople, let's make more sales calls, let's close deals. And you know, sure, there's a spectrum here. Like nobody's on either extreme end of the spectrum, but there's just a lot of resistance to this. It's like, I don't have time to build a better go-to-market engine. I just need to hit this target that's unrealistic that we couldn't hit to begin with. What I'm seeing is that there is going to be a separation. The camp that is not going to embrace this stuff is going to die out. It'll just be impossible to compete. And lately I've been using this analogy to farming. My grandfather farmed like 40 acres with a mule, right? And I think it was like 100 acres and he probably had a tractor. This is like 100 years ago. I don't know. But it was a very small farm. Today, you see like a single farmer, like one guy with nobody helping him or maybe some like temporary people farming like 17,000 acres. And then on a per acre basis, the output is like 5x. So it's like an 850x output per person in farming. This is why like we've gone from a society where 90% of people work in farming to like 1%. And you cannot farm with 40 acres and a mule anymore. Like you will literally starve to death and, you know, be, you know, out there like asking for government assistance to feed yourself. It's just impossible. I think that we're going to see the same thing happen in go-to-market. I think that the organizations that do not embrace this change are either going to die out or the go-to-market leaders in those organizations are going to leave and new people are going to come in and they're going to say, we have to have this stuff in place because once we implement AI, it's either going to work or not work based on whether or not we have that foundation. And if it doesn't work, we will not be able to stay in business. We will not be able to outcompete our competition because they are just going to be so much better, so much faster.
And on that note, that is all we have for the podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you so much, Eddie.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com and the info will be in our show notes.